2:07 a.m., East Side, Detroit. The door exploded inward with a deafening crack. "Police. Search warrant," barked the lead officer, his voice slicing through the stillness of the night. Flashlights scanned the modest living room as 5 officers stormed into the narrow bungalow. Kevlar vests tight, fingers curled on triggers. Couch cushions were tossed, drawers ripped open. A framed family photo hit the floor and shattered. But the woman in the hallway didn't scream, didn't run. She stepped calmly into view in a gray hoodie and bare feet, eyes locked on the officers with a cool, surgical steadiness. "Down. On the ground now," one shouted. She didn't flinch. "I'm unarmed," she said evenly. "This is a mistake." 2 officers swarmed her, slammed her wrists into zip ties, and forced her down onto the hardwood floor. One of them, Detective Langford, grinned as he crouched next to her. "Look what we got here," he sneered, pulling a small Ziploc bag from his coat. "Guess this ain't a mistake after all." The woman looked up at him from the floor, her voice low. "You just made a federal one." Langford snorted. "Yeah? And what are you, the FBI?" She didn't answer, but when they dragged her up, something clattered from under the couch. A small, matte black device no one had noticed in the chaos. Officer Vega bent to pick it up. "Sarge, this looks like a recorder." Langford waved him off. "She's probably one of those paranoid nutcases." But he didn't see the faint red light still blinking. In the bedroom, a pile of documents spilled from a hidden drawer beneath the bed. Sealed envelopes marked Confidential, DOJ, USB drives labeled IAD Briefing Number 3, and a thick, worn binder with years of surveillance notes. All of it now in plain view. Officer Monroe flipped through one folder, frowning. "Guys, this is internal affairs material. Real stuff." Langford barked. "So? Plant the dope. Zip it up. We're done here." Outside, the city slept on. Inside, Agent Marla James, undercover for 15 years inside the most corrupt precinct in the state, let herself be walked out in cuffs. They didn't realize she was already recording when they broke the door. And they had no idea that with this illegal raid, they'd just completed the final link in a conspiracy case she had spent her life building. She didn't need to fight. The cameras were already rolling. The cruiser rocked as it rolled over a pothole. Agent Marla James sat in the back, wrists burning from the zip ties. Rain tapped against the window, soft and rhythmic, the only sound besides the crackle of dispatch chatter over the radio. Detective Langford, riding shotgun, looked back at her with a smirk. "You're gonna wish you hadn't lied to us, sweetheart," he said, thumbing through her wallet. He paused. "Marla James. No priors. But you sure live fancy for someone with no job listed." "She could be a mule," Officer Vega offered. "Big house, no paper trail." Langford nodded. "Yeah, let's pin her to that West Side stash house hit last month. Say we got an anonymous tip." Marla watched him, silent, calculating. They had no idea the entire car ride was being uploaded in real time. She shifted her weight subtly, pressing her shoulder against the interior panel. Inside her bra strap, embedded into the fabric, was a high-fidelity mic, transmitting everything. The moment they forced her into the car, the backup sequence activated. Encrypted files from her home, surveillance footage, even the names of every officer she'd flagged for misconduct. They were already bouncing across secure DOJ servers. Langford leaned back. "You know, it's funny," he said. "You fit the profile perfect. House in the hood. No neighbor's gonna stick up for you. No badge, no backup." "I've had backup for years," Marla said quietly. He laughed. "Oh yeah? Who, your dealer?" "No," she said. "The United States Department of Justice." Langford froze for a beat, long enough for Vega to glance over. Marla met their eyes in the rearview mirror. "I've been investigating the 12th Precinct for 15 years. Civil rights violations, evidence planting, intimidation. You're all on record." Langford turned, his face hard. "You're bluffing." But in his voice was the first tremor of doubt. "I'm not," she said. "You're driving the last nail in your own coffin." At that moment, dispatch crackled, Unit 427, return to station immediately. FBI presence inbound. Secure all evidence. Repeat, secure all evidence. Langford's knuckles whitened on the dash. Vega's foot hovered over the brake. What the hell is going on? Marla looked out the window and smiled, just slightly. The storm wasn't coming. It had already begun. 2:47 a.m. 12th Precinct Station, Detroit. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Officer Vega shoved open the side door, rainwater dripping from his jacket. Langford marched Marla inside, gripped tight on her arm. The precinct was mostly quiet, graveyard shift officers sipping burnt coffee, flipping through paperwork. Nobody paid attention. Nobody ever did. Langford motioned toward the holding cells. Put her in 4. We'll file paperwork after shift change. But Vega hesitated. What about the call from dispatch? Langford cut him off. Forget it. Standard protocol when feds stick their nose in local business. She's bluffing. I'll bury it. As they walked her past the front desk, Marla scanned the room. Every corner she passed, every hallway, they were all familiar. Not from tonight, but from years of shadowing them, learning them, mapping every weak point. She'd spent 15 years earning this department's trust just enough to be invisible. That invisibility had been her weapon. Now, it was time to step into the light. Inside cell 4, the door clanged shut behind her. She sat quietly on the steel bench, her posture relaxed. From a distance, she looked unbothered. But inside, her mind was ticking like a watch. This was no longer just surveillance. This was now evidence in motion. Langford returned with a bag. He pulled out the small Ziploc of drugs he'd found in her living room and dropped it onto the intake tray. Label it, he told the clerk. Possession with intent. The clerk blinked. There's no field report. No warrant on file. No officer log. Langford slammed his hand on the counter. I said log it. Marla stood inside her cell, watching the exchange through the bulletproof glass. The moment the drugs entered official evidence, the timeline was sealed. That bag would be matched to her case, entered into the state system. And when the feds pulled the wire logs and real surveillance, it would become Exhibit A. Langford didn't know it yet, but in that moment, he committed a federal crime. Across the city, a server pinged an alert. Another copy of the night's recordings, audio, video, GPS data, landed in the inbox of U.S. Attorney Elena Ruiz. Subject line, 12th Precinct Live Operation. Phase complete. 3:12 a.m. FBI Field Office, Detroit. Assistant U.S. Attorney Elena Ruiz rubbed the bridge of her nose as she reviewed the encrypted file that had just landed in her inbox. Her office, usually quiet at this hour, was suddenly alight with urgency. 2 agents stood behind her, watching the footage of the illegal raid unfold in real time. She clicked through the audio logs. Officer Langford's voice, mocking, planting evidence, threatening arrest without cause. Each clip more damning than the last. She's got everything, Agent Brooks said, shaking his head. Body cams were disabled. But her feed, her audio, timestamps, the server's sync, it's airtight. Ruiz looked at him. This isn't just a misconduct case. It's a criminal enterprise. Multiple felonies under color of law, and she's caught them live. Brooks nodded. She's been embedded for how long? 15 years, Ruiz said. She went dark in 2010. Her records were sealed. Only 3 people knew her identity. One's retired. The other's me. She leaned back in her chair, eyes narrowing. Activate the emergency intervention protocol. Get a federal team to 12th Precinct now. 3:18 a.m., 12th Precinct. The buzz at the front desk grew louder. Hey, a rookie officer called out, frowning at the security monitors. Are those feds? Langford looked up just as 2 black SUVs pulled into the lot, tires hissing on wet concrete. The seal on the doors was unmistakable, Department of Justice. What the hell? He muttered, stepping toward the monitors. The station doors burst open. A team of agents in navy windbreakers and ballistic vests stormed in, badges flashing. Federal agents. Everyone stand down. Guns weren't drawn, but the energy in the room snapped taut like a tripwire. Langford backed up. Wait, what is this? We're mid-shift. One of the agents stepped forward, handing the desk sergeant a thick packet. Federal intervention order, signed by you, South District Court. We have jurisdiction. Where is the suspect, Marla James? Langford stiffened. She's in holding for, the clerk stammered. She said she was FBI. The lead agent nodded. She is. Langford's face blanched. And for the first time that night, silence fell over the station. 3:26 a.m., holding cell 4. 12th Precinct, Detroit. Marla sat on the cold bench, legs crossed, calm as if she were waiting for a late bus. The distant sound of doors slamming and boots moving with purpose told her everything she needed to know. They were here. The lock on her cell clicked. A federal agent stepped in, his voice low but urgent. Agent James, we're secure. Marla stood, stretching her wrists. Took you long enough. We had to wait for the evidence drop, he replied, glancing toward the intake logs. You got it. The drugs are tagged, time-stamped. Their prints are on everything. She nodded once. Then let's finish this. As she stepped into the hallway, the precinct had transformed. The air was heavy with tension. Officers stood frozen beside desks and doorways, watching federal agents sweep through lockers, retrieve files, and collect hard drives. Langford stood near the evidence room, trying to argue with a federal marshal. This is our precinct. You can't just come in and... You're right, Marla said as she stepped into view. But I can. Langford turned. His eyes locked on hers, and for a heartbeat, confusion warred with denial. Then recognition hit. You, he said. You set us up. No, Marla said, stepping closer, flanked by 2 agents. You set yourselves up. I just pressed record. She handed a flash drive to the DOJ team leader. 5 years of internal recordings, meetings, off-the-books raids, case manipulation, and a little gem from tonight's break-in. Langford's mouth opened, but no words came. Behind him, Officer Vega backed toward the door, only to be met by 2 agents with cuffs. Officers Langford and Vega, the team lead announced. You are under arrest for conspiracy to violate civil rights under color of law, obstruction of justice, and unlawful evidence tampering. The cuffs clicked into place. Marla watched without emotion. 15 years of waiting. 1 night of execution. The system hadn't failed tonight. It had been flipped from the inside. 4:03 a.m. DOJ command van, outside 12th Precinct. Inside the mobile command center parked across from the precinct, a wall of monitors lit up with live surveillance footage. Agents tracked files being cataloged, lockers opened, officers separated and questioned. Marla stood at the center of it all, arms crossed, her expression tight with focus. Agent Brooks handed her a headset. We're in. We've already mirrored the precinct server. Every internal comm, every patrol report, every body cam video, even the ones that were deleted. Marla raised an eyebrow. Deleted doesn't mean gone. They always forget that. Brooks smirked. Your body camera, well, fake body cam, recorded the entire night. Plus, we got Langford admitting to planting the drugs. Audio's clean. She nodded. Make sure you isolate that clip. We'll need it in court. Brooks leaned closer, voice lower. We also found something else. Internal affairs logs show complaints, dozens. Suppressed. Rewritten. Buried. Marla's jaw tightened. Names. Dozens. Some deceased. Some still fighting the charges. A few in prison for crimes we now suspect were staged. A silence passed between them. Marla looked at the screen showing Langford in an interrogation room. Head down, already sweating. The mask of confidence he wore for years had cracked. She turned to Brooks. Reopen those cases. Every one of them. Brooks nodded. It's already in motion. As the night deepened into early morning, the command van pulsed with the hum of data transfer, legal cross-checks, and silent reckoning. This wasn't just about Marla's case anymore. This was a systemic detonation. The first domino had fallen. and the line of corruption it revealed stretched far beyond the 12th precinct. 6:42 a.m., Federal Holding Facility, Detroit. Detective Langford sat in the small interview room, fluorescent lights casting deep shadows under his eyes. His confidence had long since eroded, replaced by sweat and silence. Across the table sat DOJ prosecutor Karen Nwosu, flanked by two internal affairs agents. She flipped open a manila folder and slid a glossy photo toward him. "This is you," she said, her voice clinical, standing in Agent James's living room. No warrant, no body cam, no protocol. Langford stared at it, jaw clenched. Nwosu didn't stop. She slid another. "This is the bag you planted," caught on her surveillance feed. "The same bag you logged into evidence with false chain of custody documents." She leaned forward. "That's 2 federal felonies. Minimum 10 years. Langford's voice cracked. "She set us up. She documented crimes," Nwosu replied. "Yours. And now, we're giving you one chance to talk." Behind her, Agent Ochoa dropped a stack of internal complaint records onto the table. "This is what you're going down for, unless you help us blow the door off the rest of it." Langford swallowed. "We know the 12th precinct ran protection rackets, ghost warrants, planted narcotics. We know the names, but we need corroboration," Ochoa said. "You were in the middle of it. Help us, and maybe you see daylight before you turn 60. Langford hesitated, eyes flicking between them. Then slowly, he spoke. "You want names?" Nwosu leaned back. "Start with the ones still wearing a badge." Outside the room, Marla stood watching through the two-way glass, arms folded. Brooks stepped beside her. "Think he'll flip?" "He already is," she said. "He just doesn't know how much yet." And as Langford began to talk, one name after another, one cover-up at a time, the weight of a decade of corruption started to rise to the surface. Not whispers anymore. Confessions. 7:55 a.m., FBI Field Office Conference Room. The digital board displayed over 40 names. Officers, detectives, former informants, civilians marked as confidential witnesses, all tied in some way to misconduct files, sealed complaints, or mysteriously reassigned cases inside the 12th precinct. Marla stood at the front of the room, laser pointer in hand, flanked by a federal task force team and legal analysts from the DOJ. "We've confirmed that the precinct used internal clearing codes, numeric markers buried in paperwork to flag arrests they knew wouldn't hold up," she explained. "The pattern aligns with Langford's testimony and what I've collected over 15 years. She clicked to the next slide. 3 mugshots, 2 officers, 1 ex-judge. These 3 orchestrated the dismissal of evidence-based complaints. In exchange for favors, protection, and in one case, cash. Gasps rippled through the room. One analyst dropped her pen. Brooks stepped forward. Langford gave us more. Detailed statements. Officer Vega ran falsified stop-and-frisk logs. Sergeant Pollard altered body cam timestamps. Marla took back control of the room. We are no longer dealing with just local misconduct. This is organized, calculated abuse of power, spanning at least 3 city departments. A beat passed. Then Ruiz, joining via video call, said, "Are we ready to go public?" Marla paused. "Not yet. We need airtight prosecutions. No leaks. No mistakes. We do this clean, or we risk turning a decade of evidence into a political football." She turned to the agents. "We move when we're ready. No earlier." As heads nodded and the room buzzed with motion, Marla stepped aside, exhaling deeply. The list wasn't just data. It was a reckoning. And for the first time, it had a spotlight. 9:21 a.m., West Side, Detroit. Home of Ernest L. Monroe, former officer. Ernest Monroe had left the force 5 years ago, quietly and without ceremony. But his name had appeared near the top of Marla's list. Not because he planted evidence, but because he witnessed it and stayed silent. Now, Marla stood on his porch in the morning chill, flanked by 2 federal agents. The sun cut low through the smog, casting long shadows across the cracked sidewalk. Monroe opened the door, eyes narrowing the moment he saw the badges. "I'm done talking to cops," he said flatly. Marla stepped forward. "Good. I'm not here as a cop. I'm here as the woman who just brought down half your former precinct." He hesitated. She held up a folder. "You filed 2 internal complaints in 2014. Both dismissed. You were transferred, then resigned. That's not coincidence." Monroe looked away. "What do you want?" "The truth," Marla said. "You saw what Langford did, what Pollard did, what others covered up. I'm not here to punish you. I'm here to give you the chance to do what you couldn't do back then." He didn't speak, but his fingers tightened on the doorframe. "You're not the villain," she said quietly, "but you can help bury the ones who were." He looked at her, long and hard, then stepped aside. Inside, the house was sparse. Old medals on the wall. A folded uniform in a plastic bin. Monroe gestured to the kitchen table. "You want a statement?" he said. "I'll give you names. I'll give you dates. But I want immunity. And I want the DOJ to reopen the Harris case." Marla nodded. "Deal." Because justice, she knew, didn't always come from heroes. Sometimes, it came from the ones who were once too afraid to speak, but not anymore. 11:45 a.m., DOJ press room, Detroit Federal Building. Dozens of reporters packed the room, flashes popping like lightning, cameras trained on the podium. The air buzzed with anticipation as federal agents lined the walls, arms folded, stoic. Marla stood behind the curtain, flanked by Elena Ruiz and Agent Brooks. "You're sure?" Ruiz asked, glancing at her tablet. "Once this goes live, there's no pulling it back." Marla met her eyes. "They kicked in my door at 2 a.m., planted evidence, dragged me out in cuffs. They turned the justice system into a weapon. It's time the public sees what justice really looks like." Ruiz nodded. "Then go make history." The curtain opened. Marla stepped into the blinding lights, straightened her back, and took the podium. "My name is Special Agent Marla James," she began, her voice even, unwavering. 15 years ago, I was assigned to an undercover investigation targeting systemic corruption inside Detroit's 12th Police Precinct. A wave of murmurs rolled through the room. In the early hours of this morning, members of that same precinct conducted an illegal raid on my home, planted evidence, and attempted to cover it up. That action triggered the final phase of a federal investigation already years in progress. She paused, letting the words sink in. As of this moment, 9 officers have been arrested. More indictments are coming. We have irrefutable video and audio evidence of civil rights violations, evidence tampering, falsified arrests, and obstruction of justice. More flashes. Reporters raised hands. But Marla wasn't done. This isn't just about rogue cops. It's about accountability. About the lives lost or destroyed in the margins of a broken system. We are not here for revenge. We are here for truth. And with that, she stepped back. No dramatic exit. No theatrics. Just the quiet, earth-shaking sound of a system finally being held to account. 2:08 p.m., City Council Building, Detroit. City officials scrambled behind closed doors. Mayor Carla Dennings slammed a file onto the oak conference table. 9 arrests. Federal agents inside our precinct. You think this doesn't reach all the way up here? Her chief of staff muttered. Langford named City Liaison Thompson in his plea deal. A hush fell over the room. The mayor turned to her legal advisor. "Can they tie this to my office?" "Not directly," he said. "But if you delay reform, they'll frame it like you're complicit." Dennings exhaled slowly, jaw clenched. Across town, protesters were already gathering outside the 12th precinct. Cardboard signs reading, "Justice for the Forgotten," and "In the Blue Shield," lined the fences. At the front of the crowd, a woman held up a framed photo of her brother, arrested 7 years ago on falsified charges. Now his name was one of many flagged for review in the DOJ's widening case. Inside the precinct, every remaining officer had been called in for mandatory review. Rookies sat in silence, staring at the floor. Veterans whispered about who would be next. Marla stood at the edge of the briefing room, watching. She wasn't there to gloat. She was there to witness. "Ma'am," An internal affairs liaison approached, clipboard in hand. We just completed the first wave of personnel audits. Over 30 officers flagged for suspension. Half have already requested legal counsel. Marla nodded. Issue notices. Start rotations. Bring in the state troopers to fill gaps if needed. The liaison hesitated. You're not worried about backlash? Marla's eyes didn't blink. Let them push back. For the first time in 2 decades, we're not backing down. Justice didn't come clean. It came with pushback, resistance, and fear. But it came. And today, it wore a badge with purpose, not privilege. 4:36 p.m., Detroit Correctional Facility Archive Division. Down in the basement of the city's aging detention center, Agent Brooks and 2 paralegals sifted through case files thick with dust. The air was dry, the lights flickering. Here, Brooks said, pulling a weathered box from a back shelf. 2011 to 2016. Dismissed with prejudice. Subject, Langford, Pollard, Vega. He opened the box and whistled. They weren't just planting evidence. They were erasing files, rewriting entire arrest narratives. One folder caught his eye. Case number 14-0827. It belonged to Marcus Ellison, arrested for alleged narcotics possession in 2014. The charges never stuck, but the arrest had cost him his job, housing, and custody of his daughter. Brooks turned to the paralegal. This case was fake from the beginning. Find him. He deserves to know what really happened. Meanwhile, at the DOJ, Marla was briefing a team of federal auditors. Surveillance footage from the raid had gone viral. News outlets were airing it on loop. In one corner of the screen, the timestamp blinked red as Langford dropped the Ziploc bag onto her floor. Every detail was visible. The look in his eyes, the casual cruelty, the assumption of impunity. Marla clicked to the next slide. A chart showing a pattern of racial targeting in the precinct. Black residents made up 39% of the local population, yet 78% of the discretionary stops logged by Langford's team. A grim murmur rippled through the room. This isn't anecdotal, she said. This is data. Measured. Documented. Proved. A young agent raised her hand. What happens to the victims? Marla answered without hesitation. We review every flagged conviction, reopen every sealed complaint, and we clear every name that never should have been written into the system. Truth wasn't enough. There had to be repair. 6:12 p.m., Wayne County Courthouse. Dozens filled the courtroom gallery. Activists, journalists, law students, and quiet observers who had waited years for this day. The air felt heavy, almost reverent, as federal prosecutors filed in. At the defense table sat Langford, now in a gray suit instead of a badge. His posture had changed, no longer cocky, now tight, measured, careful. Judge Aria Matthews entered and called the session to order. The charges read like a slow, surgical dismantling of a career built on deceit. Conspiracy to violate civil rights. Obstruction of justice. Falsifying reports. Planting evidence. Racketeering. Langford didn't speak. His attorney entered a plea, guilty. A gasp echoed through the room. Judge Matthews looked over her glasses. You understand the weight of your plea, Mr. Langford? Yes, Your Honor, he said, voice low. I do. Marla stood at the back of the room, her arms crossed, watching. Not with vengeance, but vigilance. She wasn't there for him. She was there for everyone who never got their day in court. The judge turned to the gallery. The court acknowledges this plea as the first in what will be a series of prosecutions stemming from the 12th Precinct investigation. Let it be known, silence, complicity, and abuse will no longer be sheltered behind a badge. Outside the courthouse, camera crews swarmed as word spread. The story wasn't just national, it had gone global. And at the epicenter stood Marla. Not in handcuffs, not on the floor of her ransacked home, but standing tall, unhidden, unflinching, and unmoved. 8:35 p.m., Highland Park Community Center. The folding chairs were full, not with politicians or federal suits, but with neighbors, elders, and young people. People who had been stopped, questioned, detained, or dismissed for years without recourse. At the front of the room stood Marla, out of uniform for once, wearing a simple black blazer and jeans. A woman in the audience stood up, voice trembling. They raided my nephew's house 3 years ago. Said they had a tip. They left with nothing, but he's still got a record. Marla nodded. That raid was flagged. His case is already under review. If his record was built on false evidence, it will be expunged. Another hand shot up. How many officers are still on duty from that unit? None, Marla said. All have been suspended or are under federal indictment. A hush fell, then quiet applause. Not jubilant, relieved. An elder leaned into the mic. You walked through fire for 15 years, child. For us. For people you never met. Marla's voice cracked for the first time that day. I did it because silence is a luxury too many of us can't afford. And because systems only change when we force them to look at what they've ignored. Behind her, posters lined the wall. Know your rights. How to file a civilian complaint. Expungement services available here. This wasn't just a meeting. It was the beginning of repair. And for once, the room didn't feel like a place where justice went to die. It felt like a place where it had just begun to live. 10:17 p.m., Marla's apartment, downtown Detroit. The lock clicked behind her as Marla stepped into the quiet. No flashing lights. No voices shouting down a hallway. Just the soft hum of the city below her window. Her home had been put back together, mostly. The federal team had replaced what they could. Broken shelves, smashed glass, scattered files. But one corner of the living room remained untouched. A small shelf where she'd stored every journal, flash drive, and transcript she'd ever compiled. 15 years of shadows. She opened the top drawer. Inside, her first recorder, scuffed, old, but still working. The one she wore on her very first shift undercover. She picked it up, pressed play, and listened to the static-laced voice of a younger her. This is Agent Marla James. Embedded operation begins today. Objective: expose systemic corruption inside 12th Precinct. No timeline. No backup. Only the truth. She smiled, faint and tired. On the wall now hung a framed copy of the front page of the Detroit Free Press from that morning. Headline: Justice from Within. Undercover Agent Unmasks Corrupt Precinct. Next to it, the photo taken hours ago at the community center, surrounded by residents, advocates, and newly reinstated victims of false convictions. Marla exhaled, finally allowing herself to feel the weight lifting. She hadn't won every battle, but the silence was over. And the truth had a voice now, one that wouldn't be buried again. The next morning, sunlight poured through the windows of the federal courthouse as dozens of reporters filed in for the announcement. At the podium stood U.S. Attorney Elena Ruiz, flanked by DOJ officials and members of the Civil Rights Division. Today, she began, marks the conclusion of one of the longest sustained undercover operations in modern federal law enforcement history. Behind her, a screen displayed the faces of those indicted, officers, administrators, even a local judge. Thanks to the extraordinary courage of one woman, Ruiz continued, we now have the tools to begin real reform not only in Detroit, but across the country. Agent Marla James risked everything, not just her career, but her safety, to show us what happens when power is unchecked and silence becomes policy. A pause, then applause. Far from the cameras, Marla walked a quiet path through Belle Isle Park, hands in her pockets, head lifted to the wind. No cameras, no lights, just peace. She'd received calls from law schools, federal panels, even civil rights historians asking for interviews, lectures, her story. She said yes to some, no to others. But mostly, she just wanted the work to continue, without fanfare. Because justice wasn't just the arrests. It was the ripple effect. Expunged records, restored reputations, rewritten policies, and young officers, some of them black, brown, immigrant, queer, entering the force now knowing someone had once stood where it wasn't safe to stand. She sat on a bench overlooking the river, the city skyline glinting in morning sun. A group of teens passed behind her. One of them pointed. That's her. That's the one who took down the whole precinct. Marla didn't turn. She didn't need to. Let them talk. Let the story spread. Because now, the truth was out. And it was louder than fear.